AM 1600 KIVA 93.7 FM. This is Life Imagined with Dr. William Summers for the second Saturday in October and the end of Balloon Fiesta season. Dr. Summers, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. They haven't had too much luck getting them balloons in the air. A lot of rain.
This morning, and then it looks like nothing tomorrow, and then nothing tomorrow night for the grand finale. So they will not have that, it looks like. The winds will certainly gust up, but never fear. We have the Balloon Fiesta every year, 45 years strong, and very exciting. Looking forward to that tradition continuing as always. And don't forget, folks, you can always text in any thoughts, questions that you might have. 550-5500. That's 550-5500. So people remark about how do I have so much vitality. What do they say? Vim and vigor?
Vim, vigor, and vitality.
There you go.
Triple V's.
I'll tell you, that's one of the reasons I take Revitalizer and Life Imagined. And for less than $2 a day, you can live the life you imagine and have the energy, vim, vigor, and vitality that you want. And you can pick it up at local stores, including Moses Country Store, Duran Central Pharmacy, Sam's Region Pharmacy, Best Buy Pharmacy, Manal Pharmacy, Evergreen Herbal Market, Healthy Habit Health Foods, where they have their own radio show out there in Phoenix, Arizona. That's on 6029 North 7th Street near Central and 7th for those of you out there. Or visit the website, memoryrevitalizer.com, memoryrevitalizer.com, or Amazon.com, which is taking a pretty big hit this week in the stock market. And just search for Life Imagined Memory Revitalizer. As always, you can dial directly, 800-606-0192, 800-606-0192. Last week, we talked about the experience of a patient in Dr. Summers as he was assaulted recently and recovering, had a surgery, and we wish you well, Dr. Summers. But nevertheless, you have been taking your Life Imagined and Memory Revitalizer, have been staying very healthy yourself, and decided to take a trip out last week to Indianapolis, where you were a featured speaker at a conference talking about this very product. Let's get into it.
Yeah, this was the 75th annual meeting of the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons, and it was held at the Hilton in downtown Indianapolis, an exciting town. You can walk around in that town at midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And it's very active, a lot of people on the streets, no violence. You don't get a feeling you're going to get mugged. And they have these little scooters that are amazing, and little bicycles. And you can kind of go and get on the scooter and take off, and you have to use your credit card to do it, and take it to any place in the city in Indianapolis. And then, leave it where you were, and they'll come pick it up. And around 3 in the morning, these trucks come around and go get all of these things because they have GPSs on them and put them back in the original station. So here you are in the exciting downtown Indianapolis, home of the Colts, and the capital of Indianapolis, or the capital of Indiana.
And also the place where Mike Pence had his radio show as well.
Did Mike Pence have his?
Mike Pence was a radio host, and he was basically launched it from Indianapolis.
Eddie, let's run for president. That's it. They need us.
Tell you what, if you can communicate ideas and you can sell, this mic is absolutely golden.
You were talking about the little trauma that I got. I guess it's 2 weeks ago at this point. But you really don't see any bruising or anything like that. And the elbow, that's just something that's going to resolve itself. But the reason I kind of bring that up is that this stuff is really good for wound healing. Went to see the orthopod yesterday, and he said, boy, you really, healing up like a 20-year-old. And I said, well, I take my own stuff. And I am the original lab rat for Memory Revitalizer and, by extension, Life Imagined.
There you go.
So it's really good with wound healing. Anyway, so the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons, earlier this year we got an invitation to do an invited paper for the Journal of Neurology and Neuromed that will be coming out this next month. And that allowed me to actually summarize the past 3 decades of my work. And my work has had sort of a consistent focus that, points to what causes Alzheimer's. And, it's been my opinion for really 30, 40 years that the body politic of medicine and neuroscience is going the wrong direction. Their view is when Aldous Alzheimer's in 1906 looked under the microscope at the brain of the first patient of the Alzheimer's, diagnosis, he and his buddy Fritz Nitzel, who's a neuropathologist, anyway, they stained it and everything. They saw the plaques and the tangles. And so that became the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease since 1906. And what we found was amyloid is something that accumulates in people with Down syndrome. And we know that that's trisomy 21. That's little extra messages, DNA messages on the 21st chromosome. So our assumption is that amyloid is representing a genetic problem. And so when you see amyloid plaques in the brain, it's been my colleagues' belief that these amyloid plaques are actually the cause of Alzheimer's.
Okay.
And they'll take these things apart and they'll put them into solution and they'll drip them on some cell cultures of neurons, and the neurons shrivel up and die, and they say, see, it's toxic, okay? And, when I looked at that, I says, there's a whole bunch of other scar tissue neurons that have blown up at wherever these plaques are. And what this is from the cell debris, and it really amounts to a tombstone. It's nothing more than a tombstone, okay? And I know we did this in the show a couple of weeks ago. You looked up, when was the last time a person died from a tombstone? It was 2015. A couple of kids were playing in tombstone in Tennessee, and it fell over.
Interesting facts.
Yeah, and so, tombstones are not the problem. They just mark where the body is. And the problem is, if you look at any good zombie movie, if you go messing around with the tombstones in the graveyard, all of a sudden you turn into zombies loose, right? And there is a model for this in medicine, and it's called tuberculosis. Now, when I was a kid, my dad was a radiologist. I used to go around with him, and I would read x-rays, and he would throw a chest x-ray up there and just dismiss it as negative. And I go, Dad, look at this white spot in the lungs. Oh, that's just a Goen complex. And I go, huh? Yeah, it's just a Goen complex. Just means he was exposed to tuberculosis. Well, when I hit medical school, I spent a little time focused on what are Goen complexes. And what that means is you've got a wonderful immune system. And when somebody coughs some tuberculosis at you, you inhale the tuberculosis and your body goes, ooh, we don't like this. And so what it does is, as the tuberculosis is trying to catch hold, the body reacts to it and encases the tuberculosis in what's called a caseous necrosis, but it basically puts a cement vault around the tuberculosis. How do we know that the tuberculosis is still in the cement vault? If you get treated for chemotherapy for some cancer later on, it opens the vault and you get active tuberculosis. So the body will react, and it's called homeostasis. It'll try to make things as right as it can. And it turns out the amyloid plaque, which my colleagues have been saying, my gosh, this is the cause of Alzheimer's, it's exactly the opposite. It actually is the body's reaction to whatever's causing Alzheimer's, and it helps try to clean up the problem. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's go back to what does it do? Well, the answer is in an acid environment of a cell that blew up, okay, it is the only protein in the body that will move in, and it'll grab on to the toxic aluminum, it'll grab on to the toxic lead, grab on to the toxic mercury, grab on to the toxic amounts of zinc, and it will basically encase it in cement so it can't get out. And, if you were to get exposed to lead or mercury or something, what happens is the body sends it up to the brain.
Okay.
And in the brain, it puts it in the mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria...
That's the programming. That's like the computer, right?
Yeah, well...
The mitochondria is the computer?
Well,
like
it's the
programs
furnace.
Everything else?
No, it's the furnace.
Okay.
It's the furnace that gives the energy for the nerve cells. And nerve cells are energetic little babies. Again, you've got a 2-pound organ, 2 pounds, 150-pound person, so it's less than 1% of the body weight. but it burns 20% of the calories of the body. Is that amazing?
That is
I mean,
amazing.
this little jelly, and it has the consistency of yogurt, frankly. And this puppy is just a ball of energy. Well, where's the energy come from? Well, you take these weird metals and you stick them in the mitochondria and you spin electrons off of them. And when you spin the electrons off of in the mitochondria, you create energy. And that's what runs the cell. And inside of a nerve cell, which again could be 3 feet long. I mean, measure from your spine out to the tip of your fingers. That's 3-4 feet. And so the nerve cell gets stretched out that far. Well, let's say something's going on around your elbow, and you need some energy there. You know what happens? They have these things called microtubules that go throughout the nerve cell. The mitochondria catch a ride on the microtubule, move up to the elbow, and start generating energy that's required there. So these little organelles inside the nerve cell, they're not just fixed in place. They move to where they're needed, and they create energy. And let's talk about energy. Let's go back to nuclear energy.
Okay.
The bomb we dropped on Hiroshima, okay?
Mm-hmm.
What was it that happened? Well, inside the nucleus of the cell, there are these things called positrons. And positrons, they don't like to be next to each other, And if you ever disassemble them a little bit, they release this huge amount of energy. Now, we leveled Hiroshima by releasing the energy in positrons that were the size of a dime. The size of a dime. That's all we did. Imagine. Anyway, so
that whole explosion, you're telling me, and how many positrons were in one of those?
If you put a tablespoon of positrons at the South Pole and a tablespoon of positrons at the North Pole, opposite poles,
okay,
the energy of repulsion between the positrons would be so strong across the 8,000 miles from North Pole to South Pole that it would take 3,000 pounds to hold that tablespoon down to the surface of either pole. That's how much energy.
That's a lot of energy.
Yeah, it's huge.
Okay,
There
the Earth's magnetic field would pick up upon that, right?
Yeah,
and
but this is just the positrons inside of any atom in our body. But anyway, but back to the energy that's generated by the mitochondria, you have to think in terms of how much energy comes from that. But if you blow the nerve cell up, that's released into the environment. And you have to have a way of putting a mute on it, put a screen on it, isolate it, put it in cement. And that's exactly what I think the beta amyloid is doing in making the amyloid plaques. Why? Well, for 30 years now, the pharmaceutical industry and the government have spent over $100 billion trying to develop drugs against beta amyloid. And what they find is about 10% of these people, when they do that, they go on to what's called an encephalitis. In other words,
that's the growth, right?
No, it's a huge inflammation of the brain, and they progress in their Alzheimer's, which would normally take 3 or 4 years. In a period of a month or so, they're so demented they're on the edge of death. So it actually...
The elephant man.
Yeah, well, it cuts the genie loose from the concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they have had failure after failure after failure. And last January, Pfizer, the biggest drug maker on the planet, I think still, came out and flat out announced, hey, we're not even going to try to find an Alzheimer's drug. And we have no interest in Parkinson's. Why? Because these things all blow up. They get rid of the beta amyloid, they set the genie free, and it actually goes in the wrong direction. Well, for the past 30 years, I've gone in a different direction. I've said, look, what's going on here is the brain gets insulted in one of 50 to 100 different ways. And when it gets insulted, there's a little campfire spark, if you will, of inflammation. And the inflammation grows, and it goes a little unchecked, and it gets a little out of hand. Around here, we call those forest fires or something like that. And the forest fires, of course, they metastasize because the sparks go over to another part of the forest and start the forest fire over there. Well, the same thing is you got a little bit of inflammation in the hippocampus. That's a part of the brain. And the sparks, the chemistry, the inflammation migrates up to, say, the frontal lobe and starts a little campfire there. And then it goes to the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe. And pretty soon the whole brain is involved. And when you get down to you've burnt down 15% of the brain, you're at the end of the run with your Alzheimer's. So really what's going on is an inflammation process. Think rheumatoid arthritis of the brain. Okay.
All right.
So now what you're doing is you're producing all these free radicals, and you're producing them not in the same place. You could produce them, for example, in the nuclei where you make DNA, or DNA makes the protein. Or actually makes the RNA, which then goes down the endoplasmic reticulum to make the proteins. And the endoplasmic reticulum can have oxidative injury, or you could have oxidative injury around the furnace, the mitochondria, or the cell membrane, or between the cells.
So this is your hypothesis here.
Yeah, this was my hypothesis, and I came up with this in the 90s. We made that as an application, and that is the basis of Memory Revitalizer. You know, when you take something to the patent office, it isn't just that nobody's made anything like this ever before. You have to say to the patent office, and its use is, and then you have to give a use that the patent office would find useful for the public. And that's how you get your patent license. So our usefulness for the formula for Memory Revitalizer would be that it would squelches the free radicals, and that it would actually possibly reverse or hold in check diseases such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, perhaps multiple sclerosis, and other things where the free radicals are busy running loose in the brain.
So is this the only, just as an aside, this the only patent that you hold, or?
Oh, no, I have 8 patents total, but most of them had to do with my prior first drug for Alzheimer's that really had worldwide distribution at one time.
So this is a tough thing to do. This isn't easy to establish a patent and a purpose and find the avenue that will allow you to go ahead and, I don't want to say corner the market, but at least provide the opportunity to solve a problem that hasn't been solved in humanity.
Yeah. Well, it took 4 years with the patent office, and I had a paper ready to go because, you know, I wanted to explain to the world what was the theory behind Memory Revitalizer, and the attorneys wouldn't let me submit it for publication until 2004, and it was published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, one of the better known journals in the field of Alzheimer's. So
this is all the science, everybody, that is behind Memory Revitalizer and Life Imagined. And that's everything that you are getting here with Memory Revitalizer. You can pick it up here locally, all this great thinking and research and patent. Dr. William Summers puts that together for you, so you can pick it up over the counter at Moses Country Store, Duran Central Pharmacy, Sam's Regent Pharmacy, Best Buy Pharmacy, Manal Pharmacy, Evergreen Herbal Market, and Healthy Habit Health Foods, who has a radio show. And they are at 6029 North 7th Street on Central and 7th, as well as MemoryRevitalizer.com. Order it online, MemoryRevitalizer.com or Amazon.com. You can also call direct 800-606-0192. That's 800-606-0192. So this is the science behind Memory Revitalizer, right?
Yeah, and then we went on to do 2 separate large studies of the Revitalizer in the classic mode where you go to a human use committee and you get permission to do your studies. These days, you would also register with the FDA. It wasn't required when we started these 2 studies. But, basically the first study was over 100 subjects, and that was Memory Revitalizer versus placebo in a double-blind placebo type of format. And it was so robust, we did a side study showing that it decreased homocysteine, which is known for being associated with heart disease and also with Alzheimer's. And it robustly reduced the homocysteine levels, even when people were already on some things that would normally do it, such as your folic acid, B12, and B6. But the second study, the one that's got published electronically last year and then got published this spring in print form, what we did was we compared the Memory Revitalizer to the most well-sold multivitamin that you can buy out at Costco or at Sam's or whatever. And it was a 6-month study, randomized. So when you joined the study, you could either end up on the vitamins or you could end up on the memory revitalizer. And we were licensed to go out to 120 patients, but we did an initial analysis when we had 63 patients. And at that point in time, the statistics were so robust, we called an end to the study and went ahead and finished up the analysis. And I was fortunate because our statisticians are from the University of Pittsburgh, and those guys are they're just fantastic.
And you got to hire these guys out, of course, independently to make this type of thing happen. This is out of your own pocket.
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, there's a funny thing.
It's not like you're getting funded or paid to do this.
One of these days, I expect to make some money at this, but, I mean, so far, basically, I keep investing in this idea that I firmly believe in. And I want people out there and listen, it's just to give this stuff a 2 or 3 month try and see if it doesn't improve your life. If you don't have more energy, you're thinking better. And because it is a broad spectrum antioxidant that goes to multiple compartments of the body, it has, anti-aging properties. The thing is, people who've been on this for years, they frankly look a hell of a lot younger than their age. If you get them together.
Well, you do. That's for sure. And you have been physically assaulted in the past 3 weeks, and you recovered quite nicely. Anybody else could have potentially gone down at your age.
Yeah. I mean, it's and anyway, so it really has a lot of anti-aging
Sorry,
properties.
I didn't mean to bring all that up.
Fine.
I know I'm making you relive that. So you got localized inflammations, local bonfires of the brain are not to dampen it down. What does that look like? I want to talk back again about the oxidative injury hypothesis that you proposed.
What that looks like is you're starting off as a normal senior and you're just kind of doing your thing. And then all of a sudden you get what we call mild cognitive impairment. Okay. Now, the common vernacular for that is CRS, which means can't remember stuff. Right. Yeah, stuff. Yeah.
Right. And CRS.
And
I actually don't.
Typically 4 years after the onset of can't remember stuff, you'll have diagnosable Alzheimer's. And then typically after that, you will pass away within 3 to 5 years, usually in a nursing home. Usually after spending about 2 years in a nursing home, and in that process, at $5,000 to $10,000 a month, you will burn your inheritance for your kids. And sometimes I hear, the revitalizer is so expensive, and I go, compared to what? Have you looked at nursing home costs lately? Wouldn't it be nice to not have to?
We actually look at them every week on Your Money Matters. It's about anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
For full service nursing home care.
And it's only going to go up because the cost of labor is a principal element there. If I had a choice to try to do something to prevent that, I would consider it inexpensive. And I think that, I can't say, well, okay, if you take this, you won't end up in a nursing home. That's simply untrue. But I will say, from a theoretical point of view, if you slow the aging process, that you're less likely to spend an extensive period of time in a nursing home. And I always remember that great bumper sticker, be nice to your kids because they choose your nursing home, right? Yeah, it's just a thought.
That's funny, actually. I was, by the way, just grabbing my my lithium orotate, by the way, one of the things that I am currently taking. What do you think about that?
I've finished mine, and at the meeting, I ran into a very, very famous physician, Jonathan Wright.
Okay.
Jonathan Wright is the guy who discovered bioidentical hormones. He's the guy who is Suzanne Summers' physician. You know what? She's been on quite frequently with Dennis Miller and one time with Sean Hannity, by the way. She's a very bright lady. I've met her.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, not the dumb blonde that people might think she was on Three's Company.
Yeah, she is a very, very smart lady. But at any rate, she was one of Jonathan's patients. And, and I can say that because she says that Jonathan never would. He is an amazing man. he put up persecution from the FDA, and they came in with flak jackets and Uzis drawn because they caught him in mid-process of giving a shot of B12. Oh, what a crime. Yeah, and he'd actually brought the B12 in from Germany without, letting the FDA know about it. But anyway, that's a story for another time. In fact, it'd be lovely to have him on the show sometime.
Okay.
But, I ran into him, and he was impressed with our formula. And coming from that man, it's like Linus Pauling showed up and said, hey, I think you got a good formula here.
Oh, wow. Cure
that's
for polio, correct?
Oh, yeah. Well, Linus Pauling actually...
Wasn't it polio?
No, that was Salk, Jonas Salk.
Jonas Salk.
But Linus Pauling was the vitamin C guy and gotten a lot of kerfuffle with the Mayo Clinic on that one. But he also was the guy who discovered sickle cell anemia and the genetics of it. And a very, very famous scientist. Was a professor concomitantly at the University of California, Berkeley, and Caltech. Now, how do you be a professor of, biochemistry in those two fantastic institutes at the same time?
Yeah.
Well, you'd be a Nobel Prize winner. That's how you do it. Anyway, and he also actually came up with the structure for DNA, except for he had a triple helix instead of a double helix. And the English, Watson and Crick, had better X-ray diffraction and figured out it was only double helix. But he would have been eligible for a third Nobel Prize because of his thinking on that. Very bright man. Anyway, so Jonathan Wright is at that level.
Okay.
And he went over the formula with me. We spent an hour or so together, quite privileged to have the time with him. And they said, you need to put lithium in there. And I said, we've been studying that. He said, yeah, there's really good literature.
What's the difference between the orotate and then actual lithium itself? I mean, there's two different types, correct?
Well, there's lithium carbonate, lithium citrate, and then lithium ornithate. Ornithate is actually an organic molecule that sort of encases the lithium and takes away the toxicity to a large extent. Also, when you're using the lithium ornithate, what you're really doing is you're taking lithium, I'll just say this as an example, at the level of Phoenix City water when it was well water. So if you look at places especially in the West, the amount of lithium in the table water is a little bit higher, but there are other sources of lithium. And it turns out that lithium is an essential trace metal. And there's good evidence that lithium by itself is actually a preventative of Alzheimer's. And how it does it is it's an antioxidant mineral.
Okay, so why not add lithium orotate maybe to the formulation?
We're going to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've got room in the formula now. He also, Jonathan was into, well, you got to add some fish oil. I said, well, that's a separate issue because the volume of fish oil you have to take, my God, we'd be saying people have to take 10 tablets a day.
Folks, we need to get people to pick up Life Imagine. Start it now. Get involved for less than $2 a day. You can have that Vim, Vig, and Vigor vitality that you are looking for and that you need. Look, there's a reason why I do so much. Look, I'm broadcasting anywhere from 25 to 35 hours a week. That's not even factoring in the other stuff I do as far as business, and the Life Imagine has a lot to do with that. Now, I will tell you that my sleep, which I do on my watch, I've told you that, right, Dr. Summers?
Yeah, oh yeah.
I'm getting between 5.5 to 7 hours a day.
Now, this is the watch that if you push the right button, it'll brush your teeth for you, right?
Basically, yes. As you know, my dentist is quite healthy that I got the Apple Watch. But, I think it's something that people just need to do for less than $2 a day. You get all of the vitamins. I mean, let's compare it to the mainstream multi-vitamins that are out there and the other people who are sort of peddling their formulations. I mean, they don't have the science of a UC Berkeley, of a University of Washington, the places where you've been, Pitt, UCLA, all these different places to kind of push forth what you're trying to do to make people exist with more vitality.
Well, what goes on is, first off, they don't look at their formulation as, is this a free radical or is this an antioxidant? And for example, a lot of times, especially one of the formulation for seniors for women will include iron. And iron is always a free radical. There is no level of iron that where it functions as an antioxidant. And they'll toss it in, so it'll basically cancel a lot of the antioxidant that most multivitamins have. The second thing is you start looking at dose. And then you go look at the literature, and then you go, well, how'd they come up with that dose? And the answer is most of these vitamins are the product of the 1920s, 1930s, with research starting in the late 1800s.
Yeah, the one a day that I'm taking, it just doesn't feel like I'm getting anything with that prior to me switching over to Life Imagine.
Yeah, and what they're doing is they're using the RDC, or recommended daily C content or whatever. Anyway, the recommended daily amount, RDA, that was set by FDA back in the 1930s. And there's been a huge amount of science since that time. And what it amounts to is that science since that time says, okay, the RDC of vitamin C is 20 milligrams a day, or I'll just pick a number because it's been so long since I've looked at that. And the answer is no. If you really want to get a therapeutic effect from your vitamin C, you're going to be pushing 2,000 milligrams a day. I mean, one of the little factlets that I always get caught up with, if you take your statins to prevent heart attack for 10 years, you've reduced the likelihood of a heart attack or a stroke by 4%. That's ridiculous. And you spend a lot of money, and there is a toxicity to the statin drugs. On the other hand, if you simply took vitamin C, 2,000 milligrams a day, spread out 1,000 in the morning, 1,000 at night, 3 years later, you've reduced your likelihood of stroke and heart attack by 50%. That's 50 versus 0.4%. And, of course, you don't hear about that sort of thing, but that's what the literature shows mostly since the 70s. And it shows that the real dose, CoQ10, for example, wasn't even on the radar back in the 30s. Let me kind of talk about that a little bit. That's sort of a special component of Memory Revitalizer. And in thinking through how much we should put in there, I went to the absorption literature and found out that CoQ10 is a single capsule that you buy at the health food store. Frequently, you get 5% or less. So if you take 100 milligrams, you're going to get 5 milligrams, okay? One of our competitors, I got to laugh about this, speaking of absorption, but we have a competitor that talks about how they want you to have a component that's found in jellyfish. And it turns out
that commercial's on more than I'd like to say on our station during Sean Hannity.
Yeah, and 99% of that protein goes out to sea. It never gets absorbed. It never gets in your body, much less up to the brain through the blood-brain barrier. So it's almost like a pure placebo. But at any rate, so back to absorption. A lot of CoQ10, which is sucked out of your body by the simvastatins and the other statins, when you take those pills, you're only getting 5% of it.
Really?
But if you...
So you got to really take a lot of CoQ10. I mean,
Yeah.
You'd be downing like,
And
I
the
don't know,
stuff's
$5,
expensive.
$10. I was going to say $10 a day.
Well, at one point, there are only 2 manufacturers of CoQ10. Both of them were in Japan, and they had a little problem, and so what happened was there was a shortage until they established another plant here in Houston. And the price of CoQ10 went up to about $2,000 a gram. It hit a crisis in Memory Revitalizer. But
Wow.
Back to the absorption issue with CoQ10. When I looked at the literature, if you put the CoQ10, which is a fat, it's kind of related in its own way to vitamin K, but the CoQ10 will hook on to the fish oil and it'll absorb in the distal bowel. But if you hook it up to phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine, it will go across the bowel as you leave the stomach in the duodenum. Not only that, there's an active transport system for lecithin, phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine. If the body finds those fats so important, it actually has a transport system and it'll reach out, grab onto the phosphatidylcholine, actively pull it across the bowel, bypass the liver and take it right onto the brain. So if you put your CoQ10 in there, you've just increased your absorption from 5% to, we estimate, somewhere in the neighborhood of 80%. So, I mean, there are all kinds of these little things built into the formula. Anyway.
Good stuff, Dr. Summers. By the way, I'm holding a bottle of Life Imagine, which is a dietary supplement. 180 capsules in here, and you can pick it up at mylifeimagine.com. We need to tell you guys where you need to pick up Memory Revitalizer and Life Imagine. That includes local stores, including Moses Country Store, Duran Central Pharmacy, Sam's Regent Pharmacy, Best Buy Pharmacy, Manal Pharmacy, Evergreen Herbal Market, also Healthy Habit Health Foods in Phoenix, Arizona. That is 7th Street and Central. Also, MemoryRevitalizer.com, MemoryRevitalizer.com, as well as Amazon.com, and 800-606-0192. That's 800-606-0192. And all of the multivitamins that you look for everywhere else, they're all here, and you don't even have to worry about it. It's more than enough, including 12,000% of your daily value average in vitamin B12. Someone should arrest you for using that much B12.
Well, you know, I've had people criticize us for that, but when I read the literature, it has to be balanced with vitamin B9, folic acid, and also with vitamin B6, because those guys work together in sort of a series of enzymatic handling of free radicals. And the thing is that you have to get it up to those kinds of doses to make sure that you get an adequate amount. You know, one of the things that you get taught in medical schools, there's a thing called combined systems disease, which the Danes and the Swedes and the Norwegians are subject to, and there's a thing in the stomach called intrinsic factor.
Okay.
And what that does is grab onto the vitamin B12 and escort it across the bowel.
It knows what to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. But it turns out that in the Swedes and et cetera, they have a local deficiency. As they get older, they quit making the intrinsic factor. So it was of great interest to these governments, because if you don't have adequate B12, you get a strange form of anemia. And when you get fully symptomatic, you look demented. As a matter of fact, one of the differential diagnoses in dementia is, do you have a B12 deficiency? And the Danes took the bull by the horns, and they paid for some government studies, and they showed that if you take 1,000 micrograms of vitamin B12 every day by mouth, you will pound it across the bowel, even if you don't have intrinsic factor. And so that makes it as powerful. I know you've seen the B12 preparations where you put it under the tongue and all that, and it turns out the bulk of that just sloshes out from under the tongue, goes on down into the stomach, and gets absorbed the same as a pill. It's just that it's incredibly more expensive to do the under the tongue stuff. But
let me ask you something about under the tongue stuff. If you were to take a particular type of potency, there's some things that if you stick underneath the tongue, they have a tendency to accelerate faster. Is there truth to that? Is there a way to the ingestion?
A quick way of doing that, you know, I'm a big proponent of oil of oregano. And there are certain brands that make it pure enough and put it into the right form of olive oil that you can actually put it in your mouth. A lot of the stuff of oil of oregano, you put it in your mouth and you're going to regret that the rest of your life. But, for example, North American Herb Company makes a very fine product. And let's say you have a sinusitis and it's just bugging the heck out of you, okay? You put about 2 to 3 drops of the oil of oregano under the tongue, and because it has penetration capability, it'll get into those big blood vessels under the tongue, and it'll show up in your sinuses within a minute. And you'll actually feel relief of your sinuses of putting 2 drops under the tongue. But the secret is oil of oregano has tremendous penetration possibilities. I've seen it used, in fact, I have used it in wounds where MRSA is there, and I think oil of oregano is active against MRSA infections. And if you put
Which is very common in hospitals, of course.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you want MRSA, you just go in any hospital and put your culture on the wall, on the ceiling, on the floor.
Or have your next new aspiring doctor show up at lunch in his scrubs.
Yeah, exactly. It's there. So the thing is that the oil of oregano has penetration power through a wound right down to the bone.
Wow.
And so it works because it penetrates. On the other hand, I don't know about these oral vitamin B12, but how do they ensure that it absorbs through the mucosa? I mean, you put it there, but, what is the assurance? I suppose if you took B12, mixed it with oil of oregano, then it might penetrate. Maybe that's the way to go about doing it. If I was doing a formulation in that direction, that'd be where I'd first start looking at it.
Dr. Summers, you helped me when I had the bug, whatever that happened to be. I was about almost 10 days long, but we cleared out several things. We had a blend of oil of oregano. We had several other things that were used. It was almost homeopathic, I suppose, in a way, but it was something that actually helped me, and I drank lots of lemon tea as well.
Yeah, actually, we're in the
stuff.
field of, I'm doing correcting, and that's not good. But anyway, so homeopathy has a certain science as well. But it's just in the field of natural medicine, alternative medicine. It's real. It really is.
We were trying
but you got to know what you're doing.
Yeah, and it did work for me. Dr. Summers, as always, we appreciate you being here. This has been another edition of Life Imagined here for the second Saturday in October. Don't forget to pick up your Life Imagined.
I had a quick thought.
Absolutely.
After the show last week when we gave the various phobias, somebody wrote in and said I forgot to mention claustrophobia, which is fear of little fat men in red outfits around Christmas time. I'm sorry, but
no, that was good.
Throw that in.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a lot of fun. We've done more than a year of these shows.
It's amazing,
and it's been a lot of fun with you. My life has improved certainly with you being around. I consider you a friend, and thank you so much for being here on the radio station. Thank you everybody for listening. Focused on Business is next with Terry White here on AM 1600 KIVA, 93.7 FM, web app. Directly, abqradio.com. That's abqradio.com. More great talk this afternoon, including the Albuquerque Tea Party, Living Liberty, the Republican Party of Bernalillo County, as well as the Spirits of New Mexico with Jim Hammond. Stay tuned for all the great talk when we return.
Back in my school days, I couldn't fool days, one